I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to play with some of the sparkliest fiber I have ever seen in my life. This is fiber from Paradise Fibers that is 70% merino wool top with 30% stellina or Angelina sparkle in it. It is the most jam-packed fiber I have ever seen. I have plus one more. I have six versions of this glitter merino wool top. The first, and oh my goodness, look at that sparkle. The first has the silver stellina here. This actually came as part of one of my Fiber of the Month clubs. I think it was January 2022. And this one, I think I'm actually not going to dye today. I'm going to dye samples of some of these other ones that I purchased. Now, I am a Paradise Fibers affiliate, and I do receive the Fiber of the Month club for free. And so if you want to learn more about this, I will have an affiliate link down in the video description. But let's take a look at the blue. Now, the wool in here is white, but there's so much blue Angelina or stellina, I don't really know the difference, in here that it looks gray. If I zoom in, you can kind of see more that the fiber itself is white. Next up is the bronze, which doesn't have the same amount of sparkle as, say, the silver, but also does look a little bit more tan and gray than white. Wool to Dye For actually has a yarn that has bronze stellina in it. I've never dyed that one yet, but well, today we're going to dye this fiber. This multicolored one is one of the bases I'm most excited about. It has a combination of green, blue, and red sparkly fibers in it. I don't have just the green and just the red. I do believe that those are options that are available as well, though. I have two bases that have iridescent Angelina in it. This is the Icicle colorway, where right now I would say the fibers sparkle in an orange and green kind of way. And then there is the violet, which is a lot more purple, although the fibers themselves are a bit clear. I've dyed fiber with Angelina in it before. The Paradise Fibers Diamond sock, I think they call it, has not this much Angelina in it, but it has a fair amount, and I dyed it a navy, and it was spectacular. The way that that iridescent color really popped on top of the fiber. I think that that fiber had a combination of these two iridescent pigments that we have here on the glitter line. Actually, now that I pull out the silver, even that does look a little bit gray. And I would say in terms of shine, this one probably shimmers the most. The silver is the most reflective, even though all of them do sparkle. I know that this is a little bit silly, but all I really want to do is take a little piece of each of these fibers and dye it black. I know that there are some really fun things that I might do on top of any of these fibers that are more variegated, but I want to see how much the shimmer pops if we have it over a deep color. So I think that that's what we're going to do, and I'm going to take a little bit, I think, of each of the different colors that I have here. I have 1 ounce of each of these different colors. And so I'm really just pulling out a small little sample so we can do some test dyeing here. Surprisingly, I think the one I'm most excited to see is the multicolored one. I'm curious to see how much the sparkle will show up over that deep color, even though I can kind of predict how this might look based on other yarn I've dyed with stellina in it. I don't think I can describe just how much I wish that there was bare yarn available with each of these different sparkly pigments already blended into it. Oh my goodness, that would be amazing. I'm not sure yet if I'm going to need to separate this or if I can kind of dye it all together, but we have only 1.2 grams of fiber here. So that's not a lot, and therefore we're not going to need a lot of dye to make the wool a very, very saturated color. But one other thing to think about is because this is 30% of the sparkly fibers, the wool would therefore presumably take up more dye. Wearing my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves, I am going to measure out 0.2 grams approximately of Dharma toner black acid dye. Okay, that worked pretty well. I recently used this color with depth of shade, and I knew that a 1% of this color was still a little bit gray, so that's why I pumped up the dye a bit more. Since we're kettle dyeing today, the total volume of water that I add to the dye doesn't matter, since it'll be more dilute anyway once we add it to our dye bath. We just want to make sure it is well dissolved. In this stainless steel kettle, I currently have 4 cups of water, and I am going to add all of this dye we just mixed, rinsing out our cups. So probably we now have closer to 5 cups of water in here. So this is plenty of water for the amount of fiber that we are going to be dyeing today. And so now, and the fiber is not pre-soaked, and I suppose in theory it may clump together. I briefly considered spinning it before dyeing it. We are gonna just submerge all of this fiber the best we can. And so some of it may end up absorbing more color than others depending on which goes in first. We don't have any acid in here yet, but the goal is to kettle dye the fiber, and we'll also see what, if any, of these sparkly fibers, if any of those absorb any of the pigment. Because I know that silver stellina sometimes can pick up staining from, say, certain pinks, and so I'm curious what we might see here. But I'm doing my best to submerge everything completely. I don't want to felt it, although that also may have made things a little bit easier on me. I'm sort of waiting until I no longer see cloudy, bubbly sections appearing. But I do say, I think especially like seeing some of that blue shimmer in the black dye is really, really cool. But now I'm going to add acid, and I think I'm going to go ahead and add 2 tablespoons of white vinegar. This should be enough to help all of the dye absorb to our fiber. And now I'm going to take this to the stove and start heating things up. There is a non-zero chance that things are going to turn into a mess here. Since these are such tiny segments of the fiber, there's no twist holding them together. We could end up with a lot of spread and a bit of a mess. Currently the heat is on high, but I will reduce it to low, and we're going to heat for at least 30 minutes or until all of the color has absorbed, hopefully. But my goal here is to get a feel for the type of contrast I see between the color and the sparkle, so then I can decide how on earth I want to dye this. And I'm going to be perfectly honest, I'm now considering having that be its own whole video, where we can get straight to the dyeing and less of the samples hedging my bets, deciding how I want to do this. Because I think that there's some value to me sharing my hesitations and uncertainties when it comes to dyeing something unique and new. Because there are times when I'm happy to just dive in and go for it, and times when something feels special enough that I want to pick something that's really going to make that fiber sing more than it's already singing now, because I feel like the fiber is already singing. Yeah, and part of me doesn't want to feel like I'm wasting it. But truly, if you're making art, are you ever wasting it? Because if you don't love what you can create, you can always over dye or do something else with it. So really, this is classic Rebecca overthinking territory. It's funny because I really enjoy spinning variegated fiber. I like seeing and watching the colors blend, watching how they sort of come together as I apply and things like that. Having different colors of sparkle kind of makes me want to bring the variation to it by combining the different sparkle colors into the yarn in different segments and letting that be the variation and thing that shines. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm going directly to a black, to see what colors still sing, what maybe don't sing as much, and really letting that sparkle be the star that we have here. Sometimes I dye a yarn that has lurex, and that lurex is a little bit of a thick sparkle ply and looks amazing on top of deep colors, but it has such of an impact that more subtle color changes get a little bit lost there. And so this is just another reason I want to know what makes the sparkles show up well, what sort of makes them blend in, what can feel really unique. I have a feeling that blue on the black is gonna be something really, really amazing. But that's just my gut from peeking into the pot right now. Okay, we're intentionally not very much in focus right now. And the one that stands out the most is the like orange green iridescent that really, really pops on the deep color. The blue and violet one also looks really, really stunning. And so I don't think you can see the blue as much on camera. Maybe a little bit here. I think it's hard for it to show up maybe right now, but as I walk by, the blue really, really jumps out. More so than the red or the green, although in the multicolored one, I don't really see the blue in there right now. So who knows? So please tell me, would you dye this fiber? How would you dye it? Or would you want to leave it in this natural form and really let the sparkle be the main focus of the colorway? Yeah, let me know in the comments. I'm very excited to hear your thoughts. I would also like to take this opportunity to give a huge shout out and thank you to the ChemKnits Fiber patrons, including Karen Siegel, Jessica Parko, Don Jans, Tamara Svanes, and the rest of the names you see on the screen right now. Patreon is a wonderful platform where viewers like you can help support content creators like me, and in exchange, I offer a lot of fun perks, including early access to this Dyepot PS series, and all the patrons actually also help shape the direction that this series goes by voting in polls, and there's a lot of other fun perks. You can learn more at patreon.com/ChemKnits. And now back to my hemming and hawing. Is it weird that maybe my gut says to take my least favorite and dye that one first? That's something that I did when I was learning to spin. I joined a Fiber of the Month club. It wasn't the Paradise Fibers one, but similar concept. And I would take the colorways I didn't like and I would jump in, spin them right away, try different techniques, because since I wasn't as in love with them initially, I was willing to take those risks easier versus wanting to have the perfect idea for it and therefore having the block in my head, so the things I loved more I didn't use early enough. And honestly, there were some colors I didn't love just as they were dyed, but spun up were some of my favorite yarns ever. So sometimes you just gotta jump in and go for it. And so now I'm standing here torn between wanting to leave this at just the samples. Maybe that's not an exciting video, but I'm very excited to see how these look. And I do want to compare the samples to the undyed fiber. And so therefore I'm going to want to let this dry before I decide what I do next. So maybe I will have to do another video very, very soon. I'll think on that. We'll wait for the timer to go off, then we'll see where we are. It's been 30 minutes and you can see I've done a really great job at not letting this get too hot. But there is still color in the dye bath. It's a little bit reddish. I'm gonna go ahead and add a big splash more of vinegar. All the colors are staying a little bit separate. I accidentally poked the blue one a little too much, but you know, if there's felting, that's not a big deal. The goal is to see what the colors are like here. So I'm gonna go ahead, I guess, and give this another 30 minutes and then we'll check back in. It's now been almost an hour and there is a little bit of some color left. Most of the color is in our fiber and our water level is getting low, I am going to turn off the heat here and let things cool completely. This will probably take a couple of hours, but over that we should absorb some of the rest of the color, maybe, maybe not. I do see what I hope is unchanged color so far, although it's funny because it's hard to tell about some of these. Yeah, that's our blue sparkle. I don't know. We'll look at everything. Is this our silver? No, that might be our bronze. What's funny is I'm not really seeing. No, that might be the bronze. Did the silver pick up color? I think our silver picked up color. Because I'm not seeing a silver right now. Anyway, we will take a closer look at all of this once things are cool and see what we can see. The dye bath is completely cool. There's a hint of color in there, but I'm going to go ahead and try to wash the fiber. Okay, I do see all the colors in here. That was our multicolored one. This maybe is the bronze. This might be the blue, which it's looking like it's hard to see the blue now, which has me a little worried. And this is also looking bronze. So I think that the silver ended up getting dyed, which again is the reason why we're doing the test, but oh my goodness. This is the violet one. That looks beautiful. And this is the orange and green one, which also just looks great. High contrast. So those did not pick up any color at all. Yeah, and we'll be curious to see what they look like once the fiber dries. So basically, I'm not going to use any soap because I don't want to wash things too hard. Which one were you? Oh, is that the... I don't want to wash anything too hard. I am going to let this soak in here probably for 10 minutes or so. And then I'm going to take out the fiber, sort of blot it a little bit, and then hang it to dry. So that way we can compare it to the undyed fiber. Part of me was a little concerned that maybe we had too much, oh, that's so pretty, that we had too much acid and then that could have damaged some of the fibers a bit. So, but I do believe that I did a test with sparkle yarn and I put it in just 100% vinegar and boiled it in an experiment, and that didn't damage the sparkle. Okay, here is the sample that is wet that had the blue fiber in it, and if I move it, see how that looks copper there? It's actually that I think the blue has sort of scraped off. I don't know if I'll be able to get it on camera when it's dry. I might see if I can pick one out. But I can see like little pops of blue on some of the sparkle fiber and then clear on some of the others. So that colored sparkle did not hold up to the dyeing process. And all of a sudden I feel super vindicated for having done these swatches. The red seems to have held up pretty well. I see a little bit of green, but mostly red there. That one may have been the silver. These iridescent ones did the best. These are the best candidates for over dyeing in some kind of way because the glittery fiber is just in the best shape. But anyway, we're gonna wait till things are completely dry. Here is all of the fiber dry, and some of them you can tell are still very, very sparkly. This is our multicolored one, which does still have some sparkle. I just think it is much diminished from how it started. Our blue has like a really nice subtle shimmer to it. I think it got a piece of the violet on it, but I'm not seeing that blue color. There's still a hint of blue to the shimmer, and I don't think it's gonna really show up here, but some of that blue definitely kind of came off, and there's almost like a copper color in its place in some spots. So it's still pretty, just I have a feeling it's gonna look quite different from how this one started. In the multicolor section, I do definitely see some red, a little bit of green, and some super subtle hints of blue. The silver and bronze are both looking pretty bronze. If I had to guess, I think this must have been the silver, and I think it probably picked up some pigment from our toner black dye. And maybe this one that's smaller is the bronze. but it's hard to say. Both are still very, very sparkly though. It's just on the one that I think was the silver, you can kind of see the stellina a little bit more without moving it, and so the sparkle is a little more subtle on the bronze. Now let's take a look at our dyed samples next to their original counterparts. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that this one was the silver, and the silver stellina absolutely picked up color with this black. This is something that I've seen, like I've seen the stellina take up yellow and pink and even green before, depending on how saturated the color is that we're dyeing. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, and I don't think we lost any of the actual sparkle. And so I think that this silver one could be over dyed with good success. You just want to make sure that it's not too acidic. To contrast, the bronze had a pretty subtle sparkle overall, at least compared to some of the other kinds of colors. With the black, I can still see some of that more golden, warm tone in there, and it's really, really pretty. I don't think the sparkle is diminished. Our sparkly fiber is a deeper color anyway, so I wouldn't expect as much contrast with the black. And so I think that this one also could be reasonable in an over-dyed capacity, especially if you want to have a subtle shimmer. I'm disappointed about the blue. I was hoping that we would have sort of this like navy midnight quality. The black is still very sparkly, but I think a lot of the blue pigment is gone. Then if I bring in one of the blue fibers that I didn't dye, you can really, really see it against the black so much more than the ones we did. And so I think that that is the most definitive example of the change. And so I think that when it comes to this blue color, it makes way more sense to add it into the fiber after it's dyed. And honestly, that might be the case for a lot of these really fun colors, and could be the reason why they don't exist as bare yarn options already. Paradise Fiber sells two types of Angelina on their website. There's heat bondable, which tends to be the more iridescent ones, I think, and non-heat bondable. And you can see that rather than being a little bit straight here in the bare fiber, the fibers are a little bit wavy, but they didn't like fuse together in any kind of way. This is still very draftable. The dyed fiber is still very draftable and spinnable. But what we see here is not that the pigment took up color, but because there is more contrast between this ultraviolet pigment with the black than there is with the white. And here on the white, you can see like the very subtle, maybe it's not picking up on camera, it does have a very subtle purple hint, but on the black, you very much see the purple and blue. In one of the last videos, I mentioned this with nail polish. These are a similar iridescent pigment, and over white it is extremely subtle, and over black it really stands out. And finally, we have our other iridescent fiber, which you can see a little bit more of the colors on the white, and it really, really stands up with the black. Editing Rebecca here. Some footage I think got lost. I must have been talking when it was off and then filming when I wasn't talking, looking at the footage that I do have. So you didn't see my cool swatches with a similar orange and green nail polish and how it pops over the black more than the white. And then also we're going to start looking at the rainbow fiber, which is still pretty sparkly. The blues don't show up as much. The reds show up more, I think, than the other two colors. And especially when you compare it to what the fiber looked like originally. But I decided to just like twist it a little bit, and yeah, now we'll jump back in. I didn't even really add much twist to this, but this certainly would be a very fun and unique yarn, especially if you thought about doing some of this and plying it with just black without sparkle or something. It could bring some uniqueness. And so I say this as someone who loves sparkle, loves glam. I don't think think that these blends are the best for dyeing. I think it would be way better to dye your fiber in advance and then blend in the sparkle. Because you could create a variegated colorway by using different colors that you dye originally and blending that with the sparkle and then spinning that. And I think that that would be a much, much more successful way to incorporate the sparkle. And I hope to do something like that sometime with this holographic sparkle that I have. I think that I will try to dye some fiber and then spin it, slowly incorporating this into the fiber. This glitter fiber, I think, is the closest to a silver you could have. It still has some wool. And I think it would be stunning, spun on its own and plied with a variegated yarn to add like a super dose of sparkle to it. Or even playing with these in their subtle shades and working them together, whether you're doing something more variegated and changing the sparkle in the yarn, or you are applying them together again in some kind of fun way. And the reason why I'm suggesting using this as 1 ply and maybe like a 3 ply yarn where the other plies maybe don't have the sparkle is that 30% of these synthetic metallic colored fibers does make the fiber a little bit more scratchy, which isn't a bad thing. This isn't the scratchiest yarn I've ever touched, not by far, but it isn't like as soft. And so where you might want to have the sparkle, you might want it to be a smaller piece of a larger project or garment, like as a stripe on a hat versus the entire hat. So then it can really sort of like stand out and shine. Ooh, that would be really, really pretty to mix like this silver color with like a navy and just really have it pop. Ooh. I mean, even like having the blue in there with less contrast, there's a lot of applications that we can do. So can you dye this fiber? Yes. Does it ruin this fiber? In some cases, yes. And so therefore I am really, really glad I decided to swatch the fiber versus just going for it, because understanding how your base reacts with the dyeing conditions you're going to use is important. And I'll note that while we did have the fiber on the heat for a fairly long period of time, it never was that hot. And so this was not an unusual or extreme dyeing condition by any stretch. Now, are there more gentle dyeing conditions that maybe we could try? Sure. It's possible that we could do this with steam setting and then maybe the colors would hold up a little better. But given these results, I'm not sure that it's worth it. One of these days, I'm gonna get a blending board so that way I have an easier time blending my fibers. I do have hand carders, but I'm not good at them. A blending board looks like something that I can manage a little bit. I'm like, oh, yeah, the fiber, kind of comb it and then pull it off. I'm like, that I can visualize and trying to use 2 combs. I don't know, that's harder for me. So anyway, I really hope that you're not disappointed that I'm not showing a gorgeous braid of the sparkly fiber. I may still go ahead and dye one of these for an episode of Dyepot Weekly that is coming up. I am looking forward to the feedback of the ChemKnits patrons. As I mentioned earlier, the Dyepot PS series is early access for ChemKnits patrons, which means they get to see this about a month before I release it to the general public. And so your feedback is going to help me decide how to move forward with these fibers. And in fact, I'm probably gonna add a poll to the Patreon post. You can get access to the newsletter and all the polls for as little as $1 a month. I will again have a link to the ChemKnits Patreon down in the video description so you can go and check it out. Of this batch, the fibers I am most likely going to try to go and dye would be probably the bronze, maybe because that's one that I'm a little less excited about, and so I enjoyed the subtlety and I think that that would be really, really cool. But also the ones with that iridescent Angelina, there the sparkle really pops, it gives something unique. I still, if I'm going for something more variated, would want to go for something really, really dark, probably playing into black, navy, and gray to really let that sparkle pop against the background of the wool. So that way we see it a little bit more. But that's just me. Would you leave it as it is, or would you want to dye it? Please let me know down in the comments below. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and as you know, I have doubts at times, and I think that it's important to share that with you, because as important as my confidence at times and just go for it attitude, I have doubts, I get nervous, and I second guess myself all the time as well. And so I know that going and jumping in and dyeing something for the first time can be really scary, and maybe not scary, but it can be intimidating at times. And so if you are feeling nervous and intimidated, take a little snip of the yarn and just try with a couple inches and just play around to see what happens to the fiber, because maybe you'll see, ooh, that kind of melts weird, or that felted, or I don't like what happened to that. And so then that can help. But when I did get started, I would buy 100 grams of bare yarn and I would break it down into 2 and 3 gram mini skeins. And so all those maybe cringy, really old ChemKnits videos, I was dyeing a tiny amount of yarn just until I got more confident and understood more about what I liked and what I wanted to do. Thank you so much for watching.